Hello, everyone. Just before we begin, this ep- this episode of the Green Pod is being sponsored by Business Development Bank of Montreal, or BDC. BDC supports small and medium-sized businesses in all industries and at every stage of growth with money and advice. Now that that's over, let's get back to the Green Pod. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Green Pod. My name is Andrew, and I'll be your host for this podcast. Um, t- Today I'm joined by Jasmine Gadoua, who is our first year representative at JSEC, and um, Jasmine, talk to us about herself.
Yeah, so first of all, I just want to say thank you very much, Andrew, for having me on your podcast. I'm very excited for today's episode. So, yeah, just a little bit about me. Like Andrew said, my name is Jasmine and I am JSEC's first year rep. I am born and raised in Montreal and I'm 20 years old. Currently, I am doing an accounting major at JMSB, but that's still maybe subject to change. But yeah, that's just a little bit about me.
um, and um, and are you and and are you affiliated with any other associations outside of JSEC, or is JSEC like your association at the moment?
So right now, JSEC is the only association I am part of. Actually, fun fact, this is like the first association that I have ever been part of. I was never really involved in school, to be honest, but so far I'm really liking my experience, and it's not as, how do you say, time consuming, and it's more of a fun experience and hard experience, to be honest, um, than I believed before. So yeah.
Perfect. Now, 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 tell us about the topic that you chose, and tell us why you chose your topic from the from the blog.
Yeah, so I wrote the blog last fall during the time that the COP26 was happening. So, in case some of you guys don't know, the COP26 is an annual UN climate change conference where a bunch of nations get together to reach an agreement about how to tackle climate change. And it was during that time that there was also one of the days called Gender Day. And I was kind of like surprised by having a day specifically to gender equality, specifically in how it relates to
Okay.
climate change. So I wanted to learn more about it. So I had done some more research on the internet about it. And then just so much came, like I learned so much on the internet and like I became really interested about learning more about it. So that led me to want to write a blog post about why we need more equal representation in climate solution policy making. And this is kind of like started by the fact that like there was like one big fact on the internet that I saw where over 80% of the people displaced by climate change are women. And that was like such a huge thing. I was like, I didn't know that women were that much more affected by climate change. So that's what led me kind of into like a loop, like a dive into the internet on how to learn more. So yeah.
And why do you think this is happening?
So from there's so many probably reasons why this is happening, but maybe there like a few reasons why women are more affected is because in most part, women are generally responsible for the household duties at home. So, for example, they're taking care of their children and also they're providing the food for their family, for example. So that means that they're much more reliant on natural resources. But because of climate change, unfortunately, especially in developing countries, women are forced to have to travel longer and longer distances to acquire these resources due to like the effects of climate change on the environment. So that makes them also more vulnerable to gender-based violence, for example, and also leads a lot of them to have to drop out of school because they're spending more time having to like travel all this way to get the food that they need. It's like a natural necessity, right? So that's kind of crazy to think of, honestly. But also kind of, yeah, an interesting thing about it is that at the same time, more and more women are taking a vital role in agriculture because men are leaving the agriculture for more modern jobs in the city. So at the same time, this is really great because that means that more and more women are having a role in the economy. For example, they're becoming more economically active, for example, where around one quarter of all the economically active women are actually in agriculture. So that's a very great thing about it. But at the same time, there's a lot of downsides to this because women have to face the gender discrimination due to the cultural and social norms in these countries, for example. So that means that they have more restricted land access, so they don't have the access that men do to land, for example. They also have limited access to the finances, the market, and education because a lot of women are either forced to marry young and they require their husband's permission or they need their father's permission, as well as like just because of gender discrimination, they're receiving unequal treatment and less suitable working condition. And last thing is that they're not receiving the education that men are receiving and the training on how to properly yield a crop so that they're yielding enough crop to eat for the families. So that's kind of like a not good thing about it, but there's also like plus sides to them being more economically active. But unfortunately, it's not as much as men used to be in agriculture and still are.
Yes, this is true, especially in third world countries. You you um where I come from, from the Middle East, it is very typical that the woman, uh, the mothers would stay at home and take care of the house, of the cooking and the children, and the man would go to the city and work. But sometimes it does get more extreme, especially when men leave for for long times, especially if they travel and they come back, let's say after 1 month or 2 months, and then that leaves the mothers alone basically in the house, and that causes huge stress for the mothers and the children in that sense, and because they don't have that much support socially. um, uh, it is really, they keep it down low in terms of what happens in one's household,
Mm-hmm.
and I think this has a huge role to play in society, and the fact that this problem keeps on snowballing. The women women's rights just they would keep on going down, and like when you were talking about education and then children and then many of these social norms, it just exasperates the problem. So like so like so what is happening nowadays, and what are people doing about these 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 things?
Hmm. Yeah, so like what you're saying is completely true. Like even though women are the first and the worst to be impacted by climate change, they are also the people that are experiencing the environment and climate change, like the foremost, like the first on, right? So they're the people that also have the most knowledge and experience about it. So yeah, some of the things that could are have been good solutions so far are the fact that we have to, it's all about education, educating the women in these communities to learn more about the environment so they can make better assessments on how to manage their life, for example, how to like implement better health systems, food systems, energy systems, example, so many other things. So yeah, for first and foremost would be to have climate change education, not only in developing countries, but also to implement it in the school curriculum in all over the world. That's very important. And by actually, like, if you're wondering why education is so important, because it's tackling the underlying inequities that women are facing because they're more vulnerable in the society. So it's giving them, in sorts, more power, if you say education, like in, for example, in communities, because they're more educated. Other people will respect them more for their knowledge, for example, and they will have more opportunity in their community to apply this knowledge and experience. So that's a really good thing. And at the same time, by really focusing on education and climate change education, for example, we could help develop green skills, for example, so that they could better adapt to the impacts of climate change. For example, like related to the topics of science, technology, engineering, and STEM, which is much more male dominated. So at the same time, this could help them kind of make their way through the male dominated industries, which is also an important thing. And it could also help them foster more leadership in their community, so they could have more participation in the formal decision making, for example, and disaster risk reduction in their community. So one organization that has been focusing on the education part of the climate change solution, how it's related to why women are disproportionately affected, is the Malala Fund. Gender Equal Learning Agenda, which actually urged the leaders at the COP26 to want to listen to what the youth are saying about and their demands about education, so they could address climate change, like I said, through the school curriculum, but also through vocational training. So another really important thing that has been doing good so far regarding this issue, and but that we should also much more focus on in the future, is investing in female entrepreneurship and grassroots organizations. So why should we support these grassroots organizations? Because they can provide the grassroots women, so the local women in these communities who have all this knowledge, representation, and collective action in the community with resources. So this, like with external resources, for example, so they could use their resources, like their knowledge and experience, towards being a powerful tool to enhance the ecosystem's conservation. And like I said before, to promote more sustainable use of natural resources and to build better food systems, energy systems, and health systems, for example, in their community. But at the same time, with this whole thing, the goal is to actually help eliminate the exploitation of women and girls by providing them with a more opportunity, like I said before. So it's all about reducing the gender inequality that they're facing, um, to make them more equal in all spheres of life, really, not just economically, but socially, politically, for example. So one good organization that's been helping, a grassroots organization, is the Global Green Grants Fund, which actually has been supporting over 300 women-led environmental projects per year, which they provide the resources, but they let the locals lead on their own agenda by providing them with everything that they need. Because there is some grassroots organization which has been imposing more rules to what they want them to do. Though it could be good, it's maybe like we're missing out on some things that these people could be helping else, like the world with, for example. And then the last thing kind of relates to it is how we should,
What do
yeah.
you? Can you please elaborate on that part, on your last part?
So on the grassroots organizations,
Yes, yes.
yeah, for sure. So it's really important. Grassroots organizations technically are non-profit organizations. So it's really people who are doing this for the better of the world, for example. So I think in the whole climate solution in general, especially on the political level. So for the government, it's very important that they should partner with these people because they are receiving all the knowledge from these people on the local level. So the people that are in these communities and they see hands on what's happening. Even though us in our modern societies, we're seeing what's happening, they are like the people that are experiencing it first. So these grassroots organizations, what they do is they do go there and help them out in some sort, but mostly they rely on the people that are currently experiencing this and trying to find a way to make their lives better. So they're implementing systems, they're helping them create like solutions to how, for example, they could better their agricultural and crop yield, for example. So this could also be like this is kind of a third point, but how they could help them learn more about agriculture and like better their yield producing. So this could be teaching them on their agroecology, for example, and also teaching them about the permaculture farming, which has been proven to be really good despite all the environmental degradation on the environment. And it assures a more sustainable agriculture throughout the year, despite all like the weather changes. So that's pretty much what they do. It's more of like a support system for the people that don't really have support from their own country, for example. So yeah, that's pretty much about the grassroots organizations. I hope that I have
Perfect.
told
Yeah, yeah.
you what you're
Yes.
looking for.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah. Great. So kind of to tie into like the last point about the solution, even though there's so many more solutions out there, these are probably the ones that like in my opinion are important and probably are like the first step towards this whole climate solution and seeing it through a gender responsive lens and approach. So it'll be, like I said, to invest in women leading in the agricultural labor force in developing countries by allowing them to secure rights and also to have the land access that they need, for example, that they were restricted before. So it'll be to support the local women farmers by empowering them to want to promote the climate resilient practices in agriculture. So it's like I said, with these grassroots organizations, we could help them get the education that they need and learn about the environment. So these women could actually make changes in their own community, really without like with the guidance that we have provided them beforehand. So this could help
Okay.
make more effective. Yeah.
Question. Would the grassroots organizations um, invest in the technology for the agriculture? Like, would they invest in the technology and modern technology that they use to date? Would they act as a let's say cons, consultant for the like for the farm?
Yeah, so as for the modern technology, that's probably a resource that they could provide, but like maybe it's not the ideal resource for like some communities, for example, because they might not have what's necessary to maintain these modern technology, for example, because as you know, there's a lot of upkeep with everything, right? That's modern,
Yeah,
to ensure that
it's
it
true.
works like in a sustainable way, right? For example, um, but as for what was the second thing that you asked about?
The would they help in the would they act as a consultant in quotation for the entire direction that they take towards these these farms for women?
Yeah, if you kind of if we kind of want to link it to like the business kind of lingo
Yeah,
and like world, yeah, they're pretty much kind of the equivalent of consultants, really. So that's kind of a good thing that you said that. Um, so yeah, like they're like the people, the grassroots organizations, they do have knowledge themselves and experience that they could help these communities with. So I guess it would work as a consultant, kind of like comparison. So yeah, just to
And
kind of, yeah.
um, and another question, in terms of financing women for entrepreneurship and education, would you say that in terms of financing it through government subsidies or through certain policies would make these things happen? Like, what does the role of government and and the financial industry have to play with this part?
So if we're just talking about in these developing countries, unfortunately,
Yeah.
the reason why these grassroots organizations are there is because the government are not providing them with the support that they need, especially women, right? Like they face the
Yes.
gender discrimination, right? So they're less likely to receive help, unfortunately. Um, but as for financing, from grassroots organizations' perspective, they either get the financing from or in any organization from donations, for example. But I think that in some cases there is private companies and other organizations that have been donating money to help them out with this. So that's where if you're asking about where they're getting the finances to provide them the resources, that would probably be the main sources, really. But unfortunately, in these developing countries, the government nor have the funds for themselves, but can't really provide much to, for example, in agriculture and better the livelihood of these people. So,
Perfect.
yeah,
I think I'm okay with my questions.
cool. So I think I pretty much said everything. If we just want to like touch on a last thing, how it impacts the
Yes.
modern society and like a solution for modern society. Even though we're much more fortunate and there's a lot of a gap between the rights between men and women in the modern societies more, there's still ways that we could support the female entrepreneurs, especially in the technology and green sectors, which are much more male dominated. So already kind of to give a reason why it's much harder for female entrepreneurships in these sectors is because a lot of them, when they're starting to start their own business, they need funds. But when they go to the bank, unfortunately, they face structural discrimination. So they're not getting the funds that they need because of their gender. So that's why it's important that we empower women to want to. We also like organizations could provide them with the necessary funds, for example, and by funding incubators, accelerators for the female-led startups, for example, and providing mentoring, other types of resources space. So there's so many ways that we could support these female entrepreneurs, but as well as we should also, in general, empower more women to want to take to tackle the green tech industry and to take jobs in this industry and to want to study in this industry. Because if we don't reduce the gap, there's not, it's like these sectors are really the ones who are related to the climate solution. And the women already are more like lean towards doing their work for a social cause. So it's important that we try to bridge this gap in a way. So yeah, just by providing the funding in these industries as well in the modern societies and developing societies, it's another great solution and something that everyone should think about. But yeah, that's pretty much all the solutions I have to say.
Um, I think that's great that you tackled such a topic, because in modern society we don't really think about what about completely about how goods are being produced. We just care that the goods are there, and then that unfortunately ends up creating these problems with uh, with with sweatshops and with these big production uh, discrepancies within society, and um, and I think especially in terms of agriculture, and it's really important that modern society, especially in first world countries, realizes all of the hardships that people go through in these countries and how they can contribute in those people's lives becoming uh, healthier, because at the end of the day we do rely on most of our food that we consume to come from outside of of Canada, because unfortunately um, we we can't grow all of the same food due to the efficiencies that countries have with their own specific weather, soil, climate, all of that. And I think that this entire discussion uh, should be heard much more in terms of a social aspect within companies.
Yeah, for sure. I think this discussion, there's so much more to say. To be honest, like it's hard to like just kind of like reduce it to a little bit, a few aspects. But I think just in general, like if we, for example, we want to talk about the COP26, initially the leadership team of the COP26 was only 16% female, but it actually took for a society's outcry to say, why is there not more like female representation, for example, in the leadership board, right? So I think just all to say that when it comes to the climate solution, it's very important to take a gender responsive approach, to consider like the differences between women, and also just in general to empower women in everything that they're doing, because we women are more oppressed than men, for example. Same with the LGBTQ Q community, for example. um, so yeah, I just to say that well, all these solutions they just come up to how important governments and even the next UN climate change conference gender responsive approach should be. And honestly, like in my opinion, I think that there, even though the Gender Day was a great like initiative, we should consider the gender responsive approach throughout all the solutions and negotiations that are happening, really. So yeah.
I I think that we that we covered the topic extensively in our last sort of 30 minutes. I think we can end it here. Do you have anything more to say on the topic?
Um, I would just say honestly that today was kind of just as a summary of everything that's happening, but I very much encourage everyone, like Andrew said, to go learn more about it, because this is such an important topic that really is gonna have an impact on the rest of our lives, really. So that's my last final words.
Yes, and Jasmine wrote a blog post on the website of JSEC. You can check it out by typing JSEC JMSB .ca/blog, and you can find her topic, which is called "We Need Equal Representation in Climate Solutions Policy Making," which I have read and I highly recommend. Jasmine, thank you so much on coming on the podcast, and and we'll uh, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you very much for having me today, Andrew. I hope this topic was insightful and refreshing in a way. But yeah, it was great being here. Thank you very much for having me on the Greek podcast.
Alright, alright, take care, everyone, and I'll see you next time.